Nine women. Nine women will categorically recognize Luc Tangorre as their rapist. But Tangorre, he will deny the accusation. In fact, he will howl his innocence to anyone who wants to listen. His, he will argue, is a tragic case of mistaken identity. In the decade-long fight to clear his name, he will say, truth has not only lost a battle today, it has also lost the war. To this day, he maintains that he never did rape these women. To this day, he says that the French justice system created guilt out of thin air. But did it? This is the extraordinary story of Luc Tangorre, the man who wrote the rulebook on how to shout your innocence from rooftops and get results. It is also a story of mass psychology and how people from the highest echelon of society allowed themselves to be roped in. I'm Francois, your host. A lawyer by trade, I have a deep passion for the investigative process and the mysteries of true crimes. With me, you'll uncover the lesser-known stories, the ones that slip through the cracks but deserve to be told. So, my friends, make yourself comfortable, brew your favorite drink, and get ready for this week's episode of Espresso Crime. Today, our story takes us to the port city of Marseille in southern France. Built 2,600 years ago by Greeks from Phocaea in modern-day Turkey, Marseille is not only the oldest city of France, it is also the sunniest, boasting 300 sunny days a year. On the evening of Wednesday, 1st of April 1981, the weather is predictably balmy. 31 years old, Sylviane pulls into the car park of her building block. She is back from visiting friends and is looking forward to a good night's sleep. Her plans are, however, interrupted when a man walks up to her, pulls up a knife and directs her back to her car and to drive them to a secluded spot at the outskirts of the city. Once there, he sexually assaults her and drives her back to her home address. Sylviane reports the assault at the police station the next day. It avers that Sylviane is now the 10th victim to report an assault with this precise modus operandis. The first attack took place on the 6th of December 1979. A man targets women in car parks, uses their car to drive to the outskirts of the city, assaults them, then returns them to the place of the original abduction. In fact, this routine gives the police their first clue. Most victims recall hearing the engine of a very specific car driving off, a Citroën 2CV at the time, France's #1 economy car, presumably the car the rapist used. Within 2 weeks, 5 more reports are made. The media gets hold of the story, and soon enough, the city of Marseille is gripped with fear. A rapist is on the loose. His attacks appear to be concentrated on the 8th and 9th district of the southern part of Marseille. So the rapist is dubbed the rapist of the southern district. A photo fit of the rapist, hastily put together on the basis of the victim's testimony, is circulated. The man is Mediterranean-looking, or at least dark-haired, in his early 20s, has a moustache, and for each of the attacks, wore blue jeans and trainers. That's not much to go on from, but that's a start. On the 12th of April, 1981, at around 11:30 p.m., 2 police officers on patrol on Daumier Street spot a man hiding in a corner. He seems agitated and as if on the lookout. They walk up to him. "ID, please." He says he's waiting for 3 friends, but came out of his car to relieve himself. 3 things about him make them very suspicious. First, he broadly fits the photo of Marseille's #1 rapist. Second, he drives a 2CV. And third, he carries a knife rolled up in a newspaper, which the suspect says he borrowed from his girlfriend to cut meat. The police are not impressed with his explanation and bring him in. The next day, a photo lineup is hastily put together with any mustache-wearing police officers ambling about the station. All 9 victims are brought in. Pointing to Tangorre, they all unilaterally say, "Yes, that's him." #4, "Not a face I will ever forget," one insists. His name is Luc Tangorre. He's 21 years old, a student in sports science, and lives with his parents. His father is a retired salesman. His mother runs a drugstore in Marseille. He has 2 siblings. Basically, he is a regular guy. Tangorre is immediately incensed by the accusation and protests his innocence. The news that Tangorre is the prime suspect is very badly received by friends and family. In fact, the suggestion is preposterous. Tangorre has everything a young man his age could wish for. He is popular with girls, has good looks, a beautiful girlfriend, and a promising future. He's loved and respected by anyone who knows him. Surely, this will all blow over in a matter of weeks. Except, it doesn't. Early investigations uncover various clues that make him out to be a good suspect. In his flat, the police find a gun, a fake gun, whose shape corresponds to the description given by some of his victims. Soil analysis on the gun handle reveals traces of a rare substance, barium, a substance that was found at the scene of the crime of one of the victims. Lastly, on a piece of clothing, the police find traces of Vaseline, relevant here because some of the victims recall their rapist using Vaseline during their assault. In spite of the overwhelming amount of evidence speedily mounting against him, Tangorre continues to protest his innocence. It's simple. He couldn't have committed the rapes on the 1st and 2nd of April because on those days he was in the hospital. Hospital records confirm his admission, but no one, either staff or patient, recalls his presence in the hospital that evening. Not even the patient he shared a room with. Tangorre blames their poor recall on the police, who took 4 months to interview them. Also, the victims' testimonies are inconsistent. Why have some victims managed to recognize him after spending only 5 minutes with him, while others, who spent 45 minutes with their attacker, didn't? That said, his alibis for other attacks are as elusive as a wet bar of soap. No one remembers him at a party he insists he attended. The only corroboration comes from his mum. Very handy. On the 12th of May 1983, Tangorre goes on a hunger strike. He'd preferred death to being accused of a crime he did not commit. This is where things get interesting. Moved by his resolve, a formidable network of support gets organized. A defense committee made up of family, friends, and university professors galvanizes a campaign to prove his innocence. At its head is Giselle Tichan, a researcher and journalist who ridicules the investigative process that led to Tangorre's arrest. Starting with the blatant unfairness of the lineup. Tangorre is significantly younger than all the other men in the lineup. Significantly shorter too. He's the only person in the lineup wearing white trainers, as described by many of the victims. It's clear that the identity parade was orchestrated to make him stand out, and this is exactly what happened. As for the car, sure, Tangorre does own a Citroën 2CV, but so does half of France, and, relevantly, he's only owned one since mid-January 1983, months after some of the attacks started. These inconsistencies caused the police to reduce the number of rape charges from 13 to 9. The soil sample, the knife, the fake gun, and Vaseline on the jacket. All these still hold good though. They go to trial. The trial begins on the 17th of November 1983. Tangorre clamours his innocence with such conviction that a couple of defence lawyers will later admit having had passing doubt about his guilt. 4 victims remain categorical though. It's him. I recognise his stare, his eyes, his hair, his voice. I have zero doubt. The voice of these victims must have left a lasting impression on the jury, because when the verdict comes, the news is not very good for Tangorre. Except for one, their charge is guilty. He gets an uncharacteristically hefty 15 years prison sentence. To the prosecution, the verdict is a Pyrrhic victory. The bubbles of the celebratory champagne die quickly, because the next day, the media eviscerates the jury's decision. All the newspapers, except for one, unanimously claim a miscarriage of justice. Tangorre has been wrongly convicted. On 28 December 1983, the illustrious French historian Pierre Vidal-Naquet comes to the defense of Tangorre in a spectacular fashion. In an article titled For Luc Tangorre, published in Le Monde, France's no-one broadsheet newspaper, Mr. Vidal-Naquet denounces the verdict as an abomination. He dubs it the Dreyfus affair for everyday man. For you, my dear viewers, to understand the magnitude of that comparison, we need to pause and discuss quickly what this Dreyfus affair was all about. The Dreyfus affair is compulsory curriculum material in French secondary schools. It's about Captain Alfred Dreyfus, a 35-year-old French artillery officer of Jewish descent who was baselessly convicted of treason and sentenced to life imprisonment for communicating French military secrets to the German embassy in Paris. He was imprisoned on Devil's Island in French Guiana, the prison famed through Henri Charrier's autobiographical novel Papillon. A prison break bestseller eventually turned into the 1973 Hollywood blockbuster starring Stephen McQueen and Dustin Hoffman. Anyway, I am digressing. Protesting against the Dreyfus verdict, the novelist Émile Zola, France's greatest novelist and playwright, published a letter titled J'accuse, in which he denounced a grave miscarriage of justice. Zola's letter became a symbolic rallying cry for the need for truth and justice and the principles of a fair trial. It stirred public opinion, leading to protests and debates about the deep-seated anti-Semitic sentiments within French society. It mobilized intellectuals and activists. In short, J'accuse showed how writers, journalists, intellectuals could influence public consciousness and policy. In the case of Dreyfus, the letter that supposedly proved Dreyfus' guilt was found to be a forgery, Captain Dreyfus found innocent and eventually pardoned. You can now appreciate that by comparing Tangorre to Dreyfus, Vidal-Naquet achieved a formidable tour de force. Vidal is so disgusted by the injustice that he begs his brother Francois, who had powerful friends, to go pay a visit to Tangorre and take a view about the man's guilt. Francois obliges. On his return, Pierre asks him, "So, guilty or innocent?" Francois' reply is, "Let's put it this way. If this man is really guilty, he deserves an Oscar for Best Performing Actor." The involvement of Pierre Vidal-Naquet snowballs. Some of France's greatest intellectuals joined their name to the support committee. Pillars of French left liberalism, like Françoise Sagan, the writer, Dominique Baudy, Marseille's mayor, Laurent Schwartz, Captain's Dreyfus grandson, all joined the cause. Think, the avengers of a miscarriages of justice. Giselle Tichain, the committee's head, or Tony Stark, publishes a book, Guilty at All Costs, which chronicles the blunders and poor judicial reasoning supporting Tangorre's conviction. The fire of public discontent is fueled almost daily by newspapers that have now made Luc Tangorre the poster child of miscarriage of justice. The articles denounce the injustice as not something that pertains to Tangorre personally, but as a phenomenon that could happen to anyone, so places everyone at risk. The French judicial system is accused of manufacturing guilt at will. Tangorre has now been in prison for the past 6 years. He is by then a household name. His sentence benefits from some short releases. During these times, Tangorre, he gives countless media interviews, still proclaiming his innocence. His proclamations are always emphatic, but also empathic. Never blaming the victims, "I have immense sympathy for them. They misidentified me. They endured a trauma. How can I blame them?" He attends and manages meetings organized by his support committee. He writes to his lawyers, a letter a day. The tone is authoritative, with one of his lawyers describing him as an army general. Tangorre is more convinced than ever that the truth will out. The general sentiment is that if it's only through attrition, Tangorre will prevail. Yet his appeal fails. His further appeal to France's highest court also fails. The support committee is no less discouraged. They gather sufficient funds to commission a fresh forensic examination of the soil sample found on the gun handle. Surprisingly, or unsurprisingly depending on how cynical you care to be, the results contradicts the original findings. The soil sample on the gun does not come from the scene of the crime, and significant mistakes relating to methodologies were made. The relevance of Vaseline found on the black jacket is also put into doubt. At this point, Tangorre's brother comes to the rescue. He's a chef, and he uses Vaseline that sometimes transfers into clothes, and that might have had contact with his brother's jacket, he says. So there is that. But as I said a moment ago, all appeal routes had been exhausted. So what to do with this new information? The answer is simple. Obtain a presidential pardon. Getting presidential pardon is no easy feat, but the support committee is quietly confident they'll get it. Remember François Vidal-Naquet? Well, he has the ear of the president of the day, François Mitterrand. And they are right. The French president is nonetheless a bit hesitant. I get that you get wrongly accused of rape once but 10 times. How is that possible? In July 1987, in spite of his reservation, François Mitterrand issues a partial pardon which reduces Tangorre's sentence from 15 years to 4 years. 4 years that he's already served, so his release is imminent. The pardon is partial because it falls short of making any proclamation of guilt or innocence. In the eyes of the law, therefore, Tangorre remains guilty. To the victims, that's little comfort. The pardon is humiliating. It says they got it wrong or at worst lied. The president knows best, at least better than the victims themselves, the court that examined the evidence for the charges and the jury that made a verdict on the back of it. On the 15th of February 1988, Luc Tangorre is released from prison, having served 82 months of his sentence. Outside the gates, the jubilation and ecstasy are all palatable. Friends, families, and supporters are in attendance. The media get a front seat. Tangorre embraces his parents, then turns to the camera and proclaims, "Freedom without honor means nothing. Until the truth is out, I will never feel free." Dreyfus's very own words that Pierre Vidal-Naquet told him to use for effect. His speech is self-indulgent. Never mind, the press lap it all up. Following his release, Tangorre moves to the city of Lyon, close to the Alps mountain range. He opens a bar, gets himself a girlfriend, and settles into a 10 hours a day work routine that should have us forget about him. You could think for a minute that this would conclude this episode of Espresso Crime, but you would be wrong. We are not done with Mr. Tangorre. Far from it. You see, on the Monday 24th of October 1988, the police come to his bar and put the cuffs on him. The charge? You guessed it. Rape. Or rather, rape times 2. We are the 22nd of May, 1988. It's around 9 p.m. 2 American students in Paris are hitchhiking their way to Avignon back from a festival in the French Riviera. They are 20 years old Jennifer McLooney and 21-year-old Carol Ackerman. The latter is the daughter of an important Democrat politician. A man driving an old light green Citroën 2CV offers them a ride, which they accept. The driver has other plans, however. He drives them back towards the French city of Nîmes before going into an isolated road. There, he parks and informs them calmly that he's going to rape them, threatening to kill the other if one escapes. He covers himself with motor oil and proceeds. When he's done, he gives them 100 francs, about $7, to get a taxi. Traumatized Jennifer and Carol report their ordeal to the police. The assailant was dark-haired, has moustache, and wore a long-sleeved Lacoste yellow polo shirt, jeans and white trainers. They also describe things they noticed about the car, like the missing lock of the car boot and the broken oil reader, the number of expired tax discs on the windscreen. Crucially, one of the victims also had time to quickly see a pile of the same book in the back of the car before the rapist covered them with a blanket. The book had the word culpability or something like that in the title, with the picture of a man with a moustache on the cover. One enterprising police officer decides to pursue that clue. He asks a librarian to run a check on all books with the words guilty in the title. After 2 months, Giselle Tichain's Guilty at All Cost, yes, that book, comes up in the search. When the police read what the book is about, they can hardly believe it. It's about a serial rapist. When the book is shown to the victim amongst 16 other books to avoid accusation, they were fed the information. They are horrified. Not only is it the same book, but the victims is adamant that the man on the cover is the actual rapist. The victims also confirm the pictures of the car and Tangorre amongst other pictures. The police stake Tangorre's bar. Their visual inspection of his green car parked nearby confirms the many details given by the victims. After his arrest, the police search his bar and flat and find more incriminating evidence: a bag, the yellow Lacoste shirt, and the 94 copies of his book. Tangorre does what he does best when accused of rape. He denies hinting at the conspiracy by the police to try and frame him. Jennifer and Carol travel to France to formally identify him. In the lineup, they identify him with ease. They are left petrified, speechless. Carol bursts out in tears. On his way to speak to the judge, Tangorre crosses paths with them in the corridor of the police station. Upon seeing them, he screams and insults them. This incident is particularly telling for two reasons. Tangorre somehow managed to recognize them without any kind of prompt, when according to his denials, he did not know the victims. Secondly, his defense teams see a side of their client they had seen before, a capacity to erupt into an uncontrollable rage. Tangorre immediately denies. "I swear it. On the 23rd of May, I was in Marseille. I swear it. I am innocent." He's being framed, he says. Why would the girls be in on it? They are manipulated by a police force bitter that they didn't manage to pin an earlier conviction on him and resent that he's asking for a judicial review. It's all a huge setup. Besides, he has an alibi for the time of the attack. He was at a party celebrating christening with his family. His mother confirms it's true. He was in Marseille all day with us. To support their claim, they produce pictures of the christening. Except that, the picture, well, it backfires spectacularly, because in these pictures, he is seen wearing the very yellow Lacoste polo shirt and the white jeans and trainers Jennifer and Carol's rapist just happened to be wearing. More coincidences. He demands a DNA test as recently used months before the first time to catch killer Colin Pitchfork in the UK. Unfortunately, Carol and Jennifer's clothes have been thrown away accidentally. Luc's childhood friend confirms that she spoke with him after dinner at around 10:15 p.m., except that she will later retract her testimony because she says the police confused her. The defense says that the car journey described by the victims, Marseille to Nîmes in 2 hours, is impossible to do in the time frame, except that when the claim is tested, it is shown to be untrue. Tangorre's sour grapes theory does not impress his committee. To them, these new allegations bring forth an awful, terrible possibility. They might have been had after all. His support disappears practically overnight. Tangorre is not deflated, not one bit. In prison, awaiting his trial, he types a 100-page-long treatise articulating his defense, a document he sends to all newspapers, media outlets. In his desperation, he attempts a jailbreak, but he's no tattoo-loving escape artist, so fails. Doesn't that prove his guilt? His lawyers. On the contrary, it's the logic of an innocent. You gotta love lawyers. Tangorre appears in court on the 3rd February 1992. The media is in attendance too. He comes prepared with 6 lawyers, including top defense courtroom tenors, Paul Lombardi and Jean-Louis Pelletier. Court heavyweights against relatively green defense lawyer Pascal Coutulic-Jaouin. In court, Tangorre is poised, focused, and combative. He knows his file by heart, where to find every piece of evidence produced by the police. Every punctuation in every witness statement. Every diagnosis made by every psychiatrist. Every half-remembered comment made by every witness. Everything. But maybe that was part of the problem. His lawyers will later recall that he always had an answer to everything. When you'd ask him a question, instead of answering, he'd check his notes first. This lacked spontaneity and gave the impression he wasn't being honest. He's also very argumentative with his own lawyers. He talks over them in court and flares up when they disagree with him. Knowing what to expect, the prosecution case, like the police investigation, is tight. Nothing has been left to chance. Perhaps the final nail in Tangorre's defense is a detective's chance encounter of someone who knew someone who used to date him in his teens. That former girlfriend testified that the scene of the crime was meters away from where he used to make out with her as teens. But ultimately, the fluid, precise, and impassioned testimonies of Carol and Jennifer leave zero doubt that his conviction is now a formality. On the 18th of February 1992, the guilty verdict that everyone expects is pronounced. He gets 18 years. Tangorre shouts out, "No, not a second time, not a second time." His mother screams injustice, faints, and is taken away by ambulance. The news of the verdict causes sensation across France. His support committee enters a period of deep shame and self-reflection. They realize that they unwittingly aided and abetted a man's release that led to the rape of 2 young American girls. They accept full responsibility. On 15th February 1992, 3 days before the verdict is announced, Vidal-Naquet, the historian, keeps his promise and issues a public apology in Le Monde, the very same newspaper where years prior he used to proclaim Tangorre's innocence. He will later comment that, "This is a period of my life I am not particularly proud of." He will also admit that his words never ever had the same weight after that. Unbelievably, and I kid you not, this is still not the end of the story. Luc Tangorre is released on the 1st of September 2000. We won't hear from him again until summer 2014. By that time, he has settled in a new life. He has a new partner and a little girl. However, on August the 10th, 2014, Tangorre is arrested at Gros du Roi following the accusation of a 12-year-old girl of indecent assault inside an inflatable beach game. He is released on bail. Luc Tangorre denies the allegations. He claims to have never seen these girls, even though some are able to provide precise information about him. They know him as they often played with his daughter. True to form Tangorre, he claims conspiracy. Simple. The police resent him for getting a pardon for the 1983 conviction, he says. On 12th of September 2019, the criminal court condemns Tangorre to a 3.5-year prison sentence for sexually assaulting 3 minors between 2012 and 2014. Tangorre won't appeal the ruling. However distasteful we may find him, there's no denying that Luc Tangorre is a compelling and enigmatic figure. Any man who manipulated the media, rallied public support, and bagged himself a presidential pardon for crimes he actually committed is impossible to overlook. Personally, I find it both disturbing and disappointing that silver-tongued Tangorre managed to hoodwink those in power into granting him an early release. With a masterful blend of persuasion and theatrics, he twisted the improbable into the believable, reshaping reality to fit his self-serving narrative. And yet, in a cruel paradox, there may be men and women languishing in prison today, not because they are guilty, but because they lacked those performance skills of persuasion to spin their own truth convincingly enough to escape it. Some have speculated that Tangorre's stubborn denial of guilt stems from some split personality disorder, a condition that would allow him to lie with sincerity, as it were. Maybe. Or was he simply a highly intelligent pervert, fully aware of what he was, who, had he chosen a different path, could have made a killing selling used cars? Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. His victims have lived with a sentence far worse than his own. From not being believed to seeing their abuser given an early release must have been a bitter reality for them. We wish them strength and peace wherever they may find it. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Espresso Crime. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. This channel is still very young and any support for it will be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. Until the next episode, take care of yourself and of each other.